So today is Thursday. It's the 5th day of Holy Week, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, during this time, it was a time that all the Jews were looking forward to, and it was customary for them to sacrifice a Passover lamb. The first thing that we see happen on that day is we see Jesus telling his disciples to go prepare a place for him. He gives them instructions to go into the town to ask for a guide, and a few basic instructions to just get ready for the Passover that evening. During the Lord's Supper and communion, Jesus says, he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them and said, "Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many." Now, he says this is how we're supposed to remember him, to remember what he's done for us at Easter, dying on the cross for us, rising from the dead for us. After the Lord's Supper, and after they've had this dinner, Jesus decides to wash the disciples' feet. Right out the gates, the disciples resist this, and they're like, who are we that you would wash our feet? And Jesus replies very bluntly, and he says, "If I don't wash your feet, you have no part with me." And so at that point, Peter is like, "Wash all of me, just do everything." But this is really just a visual, a great example of how God has called us to not only in word to love one another, but to actually show each other that we love each other and to serve one another. And it really hits home and shows us that if we want to serve the Lord, he's calling us to a life of service where we serve other people. And so we move on. We move on with the scene. The scene goes from dinner. Now they go to the garden. And the garden is another big scene that we think of when we think of Easter. Now, this is the Garden of Gethsemane. And this is where Jesus goes to pray. And he knows what's coming. He knows that his time is coming soon. And he's going to the Father with his request. And he says, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me." And then he says, "Yet not my will, but your will be done." And I think this is the perfect example of how we should be praying. When we have a request, when there's something that's heavy on our hearts, we absolutely need to bring it before the Lord. But we need to finish that request with "not my will, but your will be done." And I just really think it's beautiful that Jesus understood what was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen, and he knew how hard and how big that was. And he brought it before God. He knew that he was actually going to die on the cross, but he still brought his request before the Lord. And he finished it with, "Not my will, but your will be done." In the Garden of Gethsemane, after we see Jesus praying to God, we also see his betrayal and arrest. This is where Judas of Iscariot comes with a bunch of guys, and he kisses Jesus on the cheek, and that just identifies him as the one that they're supposed to arrest. They arrest him, they take him before the council, they bring all sorts of false accusations against him, and we see Peter denying Jesus that very night. Again, so much happened on Thursday. It's a day that we can look back at and really remember a lot about the stories that we hear on Easter. As we conclude Thursday, I think as we look back at what happened on Thursday, we see Jesus serving his disciples on a very practical level, humbly washing their feet. We also see that Jesus was betrayed, and we see that he struggled with what was going to happen, and ultimately he asked that God's will be done in his life, and he went before the council and was arrested, and that concludes Thursday.